I wasn't framed. I wasn't led astray. I made choices, and the choices burned. When the verdict landed, the judge called me a deliberate man, as if that were worse than the crimes themselves. Life without parole. No visitors. No petitions. Concrete and fluorescent daylight until my bones forgot the syntax of sky. They had buried me in a box that pretended to be a room, and I'd started to believe in the burial, until she came. 4 guards unbolted my door. 2 on my shoulders, 2 at my back. We moved down corridors where condensation sweated out of the paint, and the lights hummed like trapped insects. Keycards flashed. Gates slid. The air cooled as if descending. They stopped at a reinforced door and opened it into a white cube, 1 table riveted to the floor, 2 chairs, a woman in a gray pinstripe suit already watching me. Not pretty. Not severe. Efficient. Blue eyes that read like a countdown. They shackled me to a ring in the tabletop. Jack Mercer, she said. Do you want to rot here until you are a rumor? Or do you want a chance? Her voice carried studio polish, no wasted syllables. I didn't answer. She slid a folder across the steel. I'm Dr. Evelyn Shaw. Tap. There's a site. Codename NADIR. A cave system in the Carpathians. Deepest ever mapped. First expedition didn't come back. Tap. Their implants transmitted for several kilometers, then cut out. We believe the cause was biological. Possibly sentient. She opened the folder. Satellite images. Aerials of slate ridges and snow-choked passes. Then stills, men and women in sealed suits standing knee-deep in a jagged throat of rock. Nothing explanatory. We considered sending career people, she said, but the risk is inadvisable. You're replaceable. A convicted arsonist with a body count. A dead man on layaway. I waited. You won't go alone, she said. You'll have a team and a guide. You'll be instrumented with live telemetry, audio, video. If you survive and bring back what we need, your record is expunged at federal and international levels. You choose a new life and disappear into it. For a second, the taste of sky ghosted the back of my throat. Yes, I said. Good. She nodded toward nowhere. A needle stung my neck. Cold unzipped my spine. The ceiling delaminated into light, and the light went out. I woke in a room too white to be trusted. No fixtures, just a ceiling panel that glowed like a captive morning. A man in sterile scrubs stepped in, motioned with 2 fingers. No words. I followed him down a short hall into a briefing chamber. 4 chairs faced the screen. 3 of them full. The first man sat legs braced, tattoos to the wrist, beard like a dare. His shirt read Riker in black letters that looked like they wanted trouble. He snorted when he saw me and kept the smirk in the air, like he'd paid rent on it. Beside him, Cole, brick-shouldered, eyes fixed to the middle distance, as if it owed him money. Hands clasped, knuckles polished. The third was smaller, late 20s maybe. Shoulders hunched, pale under the lights. She twitched at the jaw, then the neck, then the fingers, little stutters that didn't ask permission. Her gaze didn't settle. Every few breaths a faint sound escaped her, half expelled, like her body had opinions about silence. I took the last chair. The lights dimmed. The screen bloomed with cave footage that showed too little and implied too much. Rakes of limestone, a fall of black distance, a smear of sensor readouts marching into instrumental panic. No voiceover. Just the suggestion of depth. The film died and we were shepherded into a room of cold steel without chairs. A man in a black uniform held a tablet in one hand and a remote in the other. A patch on his shoulder read Site NADIR. As you've been told, he said, sounding tired of the script, you're going underground. You'll be suited, armed, monitored. Your vitals and transcripts will be live to the surface. He lifted the tablet, tapped. You have a guide. Her name is Mira. The small woman flicked her eyes up. Twitch, swallow. She was on the first mission, he continued. She wasn't present for the incident. She turned back before it occurred. She was found at the mountain base 3 days later. Riker grinned. So the guide is a runner. Mira flinched and reassembled herself by inches. Your job is not to editorialize, the man said without looking at him. Your job is to follow the route she provides, verify the route markers, locate and document any anomalous biological activity, and return on schedule. Do not improvise. Do not deviate. Do not be clever. If you try for the surface early, you wait at the locked threshold until extraction. He let that settle like a loaded chamber. They took us to a windowless transport with no handholds for time. We sat across from each other, harness belts whispering with emotion. For a long while nobody spoke. The road vibrated through the frame. Myra's knee bounced hard enough to tick. You okay? I said. A blink too fast. Sometimes, she said, the word folding in on itself. It gets loud. You left, I said. Before. She nodded. I got 30 minutes in and something in me said out. No reason. The walls were the same size, the air was the same temperature, the team was fine, but I had to leave. So I left. I walked all night and a day. They found me in a ravine when my legs wouldn't work. You afraid of going back? Yes, she said, and then, softer. Of course. The truck stopped. No one opened the doors for 20 minutes, as if to remind us what permission felt like. When daylight finally hit, it hit hard enough to make my eyes think I'd imagined it before. We stood inside a high bowl of pale rock. Perimeter fencing wrapped in razor wire made a false horizon, and a group of figures in hazard suits waited by a crate of rifles and shotguns, optics already mounted. The sky was a strip of cold blue, and the mountains pressed their white knuckles against it. Riker went straight for the biggest rifle and grinned when nobody stopped him. Cole chose a pump action and draped a bandolier like a pageant sash. I took a shotgun and a sidearm I didn't trust. Mira backed against the truck and touched nothing. What about her? Riker called. We need a tour guide, not a tourist. One of the suited men stared at Riker through a visor that reflected the sky and didn't blink. Riker let the grin fall and drifted toward us like a dog deciding not to bite. Brief orders. No radios below a certain depth. No comms after the first gate. Staged caches of water and calories at the designated waypoints. Retrieval in 40 hours at the same door we entered. The cave mouth wasn't a mouth. It was a suture, a seam between boulders, a slit that you had to believe in to approach. The air that came out was not cold and not warm. It was the air of a machine that had been running long enough to think it was the weather. We filed in with headlamps throwing cones of dirty light. The stone was younger than the light made it look. It kept changing. A squeeze became a hallway. A hallway collapsed into something like a cathedral if cathedrals were carved by glaciers and then softened by breath. The sound of our boots said we were always the first, and always late. Mira led, laminated map strapped to her thigh, a tablet mounted to her vest that painted our route in breadcrumb points. Every few meters she stopped with the carefulness of someone listening to something they'd rather not hear. We found the first waypoint, an old survey flag half buried in dust. We ate without speaking. Cole closed his eyes and slept with the off-switch certainty of soldiers. Riker cleaned his rifle and glanced at Mira like a problem he could solve by getting close enough. I sat with my back to a wall so wide it felt like a fraud. Mira drifted to me. Can I? She gestured at the space beside me, not at the space so much as at permission. Sure. She sat, hands folded tight. I don't want to sleep near them, she said. I don't know if that's fair. It's fine. I looked at her hands. Tremor breathed tremor. You were right to run. You just ran the wrong way. She nodded, then lowered her head and said something I didn't catch. A word like sorry with the apology removed. Then she slept in jerks and starts, eyes moving under the lids. We woke and walked. Hours later, the cave changed temperature without changing temperature. The slope that had been pulling us down with its fingertips let go, and the walls widened into a chamber the size of aviation hangars. Our light revealed more light caught in stone, Veins of metallic gleam poured into the geology like calligraphy that couldn't decide on a sentence. That was when we saw the trail. At first it looked like someone had spilled mercury and left it to crust. Lines of dull silver fused to the ground, draped along natural channels, looped into circles where motion must have spun or stalled. Some of it clung to walls. Some ran over an arch and drooled down the other side, frozen mid-fall. Riker crouched. "You seeing this?" Myra's voice went thin. The initial satellite scan registered unusual reflectance in this band. Heavy elements. Someone upstairs said rhodium once and then changed the subject. Cole touched his boot to align. It didn't smear. He grunted and we moved on. The first clicking came as an echo, hard to localize, a sound made by fingernails on a glass window in a house with the windows removed. Then it came again, faster. I turned just as it rounded the bend behind us. It moved as if it remembered other shapes. Four-limbed at first, then taller, rising into a lobe that used the walls like opinions. Its arms twisted out of human geometry and ended in edges, somewhere between talons and tools. The surface of it wasn't skin. It was something poured and allowed to set wrong. Patches of chrome froze into cables of muscle that rolled under darker plating. Where a head should have been, an elongated helm tapered to a point behind the shoulders. When its jaw opened, it split downward into 4 filaments that unfolded with surgical patience, and strings of molten metal stretched and parted. It lifted its head as if scenting. It didn't see us. Riker raised his rifle and fired full auto because of course he did. The gunfire crashed down the chamber like a thrown chandelier. The shells clattered in a circle around his boots. Cole stepped forward and fed the air more noise, racking and firing, racking and firing. The creature didn't flinch. It moved. Fast, fluid, no wasted motion. Riker took half a laugh with him when it reached him. The other half never had time to be born. 2 motions made a red logic on the floor. Cole went down mid-cycle, his pump locked open like a jaw asking why. I ran without deciding to, and that triggered Mira. We sprinted into a side passage that pretended privacy. The clicking behind us accelerated and then diffused as the sound found fresh geometry to argue with. "Stop," I whispered, dragging her behind a curtain of rock where the floor dipped. "He can't see." Myra's eyes blew wide. Her body ticked, head, shoulder, the little vocal gasp she couldn't help. "You have to be quiet," I said. "Do you hear me? Quiet." She nodded hard enough to tremble, knuckles white on her thighs. The ticks fought, then lost ground. She went still the way a bridge goes still, by holding everything and pretending it's simple. We moved like thieves of air. The tunnel constricted and then opened again into a chamber smaller than the last but big enough to make our lamps feel shy. The ceiling bowed low, the rock ribbed and mineral slick. My boot found a shape. I caught myself on an outcrop and looked down. A body, what was left of one. Environmental fabric fused into flesh, the chest peeled back as if heat had wanted to see what it could do. The skin had gone gray where it hadn't burned. 3 more nearby, collapsed in attitudes that pretended to be rest and didn't succeed. Mira knelt beside one and touched the sleeve. "I knew her," she whispered, and the whisper felt like a crime. "We have to move," I said. "Now." The tunnel pitched downward and ceased to be a tunnel. We slid on hands and boots, rocks skimming gloves, belly scraping mineral teeth. The air changed again, warmer, damp. My tongue tasted electricity. And then the world burned gold. We reached a ledge overlooking a lake that wasn't water. It lay perfectly still, a plain of molten metal so smooth it reflected like a judgment. Colors bled and reformed, silver, blue, gold, like they were practicing for alchemy. The heat radiated but refused to blister, as if it were seeping through a membrane placed exactly between survival and story. Dead end. We pressed behind a serrated fin of stone at the lake's edge. The only cover in sight. The only choice left. Myra's body rebelled. Her hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes shone with tears pulled not by sadness but by the physics of fear. If she made a sound, we died. The clicking entered the chamber and grew teeth. I felt it in my jawbone. It stalked, listening. A shadow shifted across the opposite wall like a pendulum made of arguments. Mira grabbed my forearm and squeezed. Her nails found skin through fabric. She shook her head. Her lips formed words that didn't arrive. I looked at her. I knew what my eyes meant because her eyes changed when she saw them. Please, she mouthed without breath. The creature's clicking paused. It tilted in our direction. Not sight, attention. I lifted the shotgun. The action felt heavy and the barrel felt light, and both were lies. Mira shook her head harder, tiny sharp motions, no vocalization. Her hand clamped down on me as if she could keep the decision from happening by holding my arm where it was. I fired. Her head snapped sideways. The wall behind us took an arc of red. The sound it made was smaller than I expected. The lack of her noise was enormous. Silence opened like a door. The creature moved, an explosion with rules. It landed above me on our cover stone, its weight traveling through my teeth. Slowly, with a patience that felt like insult, it lowered itself to the ledge and reached for what had been Mira. It lifted her one-handed, two of the surgical blades supporting her ribcage like a broken plate, and turned. It walked into the lake. The surface accepted both of them. Metal rose to cowl its shins, knees, hips, shoulder. The lake folded over their bodies and smoothed itself as if nothing had been there to disturb it. I waited for breath to remember me. It did eventually, in a shallow imitation. I ran. Upward as a lion caves. You go the way you came, or you invent a new way that punishes you for believing in it. I kept one glove on the rock, counting landmarks backwards. Riker's rifle lay twisted near a wall where blood had decided how to decorate. Cole was folded over a boulder like a coat, his middle cancelled. I didn't stop. The threshold door showed itself as a smudge of geometry thrown against the rock. Two guards waited inside their helmets, as if they were waiting for a different man. I crossed the line and fell to my knees because my legs were done lying. One took the shotgun from me with a motion that said I was no longer authorized. The other unclipped my camera and turned it off. They didn't ask questions. They walked me through 2 checkpoints that smelled like bleach and bureaucracy. Then they gave me back to Dr. Evelyn Shaw. She took a seat across from me without asking if the chair would accept the symbolism. She set a folder on the table. Maybe the same folder, maybe a cousin. We reviewed your footage, she said. Your documentation exceeded our expectations. I stared at her. Myra's death was unfortunate, she said. The word didn't have room for what it described. She closed the folder and set it aside. You've completed the contract. That was that. A man in black walked me down a hall to a door that opened on a day the color of steel, though bluer. He handed me an envelope. Travel documents. A debit card. Credentials with a different name that had once belonged to someone I would never meet. He walked me 2 more doors and didn't follow me through the second. The outpost was a scab on the mountain's skin, and once I cleared the last fence, it shrank into a shape that could be anything: a rock, a shadow, a rumor. The wind off the Carpathians tasted like salt that had never known the sea. I walked until the facility became a line and then a memory. I was free. Freedom is a word that feels heavy until you pick it up and realize you can carry it, and then you realize you don't know where to take it. I bought a ticket under a name that belonged to a man who liked fishing and had opinions about jackets. I sat at the back of a bus and practiced being air. I rented a room above a bar in a city where the streetlights carried all the stories and the people carried none. At night I woke to clicks. Not real ones. Pipes. Fridges. The rib of the building adjusting. I told myself this. I told myself many correct things. Then I stayed awake anyway. On the 3rd night I poured a glass of water and watched it hold together, and thought about lakes that weren't water. The cup sweated on the windowsill and made a ring like something orbital. I set the glass on top of the ring to line it up and make the world feel obedient for 1 second. I dreamed of the lake taking shapes. Of surfaces folding up like hands. Of a blind thing that could love a frequency I hadn't learned yet. On the fourth day, a man sat next to me on a bench by the river and pretended the river was interesting. You walked, he said. I didn't look at him. You walked far enough, he said, that we could be confident you weren't being followed by anything measurable. That lake is a closed system. A beat. We think. I kept my eyes on the water. A gull stabbed at something and looked disappointed by success. You did well, Jack, the man said. Dr. Shaw sends her regards. When you're ready to do more good work, dial the number on the back of your card. There's a tone. Leave the time and place. We'll find you. Or don't. He stood. We appreciate your service. He walked away. I didn't turn to see if he left footprints. I didn't dial. I tried to teach my bones new grammar. I learned the bus schedules. I learned which grocers had overripe fruit and which let it rot. I learned the sound of sirens at 3 a.m. and the way the city coughed itself awake at 6. I bought earplugs. I bought whiskey. I bought a radio and threw it away after the newscaster said the word, sinkhole, twice in one story. I told myself this was coincidence, and in a country that used to know me, coincidence is one of our best exports. One morning, the debit card declined. Not for lack of funds. For administrative review. The cashier smiled the smile that says I have no idea who you are and that's on purpose. I paid cash. Cash became a problem afterward. The envelope on my mattress had a second card and a note. Travel restrictions in effect in your area. Use the enclosed until further notice. The handwriting looked like it had never made a mistake and never forgiven one. I stood at the window with the new card in my hand and watched the river carry something that might have been a branch, and might have been a fish, and might have been a piece of a conversation. The glass showed my face like a witness. I held the card over the trash can and didn't drop it. The clicks woke me that night, and I let them. I didn't reach for the earplugs. I counted them. Some were pipes, sure. Some were the radiator relitigating its purpose. Some were not. I listened like the cave had taught me, counting not the sounds but the silences between them, charting the map those silences drew. No molten lake surged through my floor. No blind thing split its jaw and tasted me. The city went on pretending it wasn't built on the remains of older cities that had done the same. But I knew where the door was. I knew its lock. I knew its schedule. Sometimes I wonder about Mira in the second before the shot, if she understood. If there is a word for mercy when mercy looks like an erasure. If that lake had a choice when it took her, or if taking is the only verb it knows. On days when the wind comes down the buildings like it remembers mountains, I think about a depth no rope can tell you and a surface that accepts answers in any language as long as they arrive hot enough. I don't dial the number. I carry the card. I walk. In the reflection of certain windows, when the angle is wrong and the light is too honest, I see a man who looks like he got out of a box and is still carrying the shape of the box in his shoulders. I see a man who is alive because he chose which sound mattered more. Freedom has weight. So does silence. At night I hold one in each hand and try to determine which is heavier.